It all began when the goblin chief died, and two soldiers who were present at the time of his death started a battle to determine who would become the new owner of his weapon. Enraged, one of the goblins lunged at the other, who was holding the club, declaring that he would be the new leader. Apparently, being the two strongest warriors, they clashed over the weapon while the rest of the goblins cheered and shouted in excitement, urging them on. The two combatants exchanged punches and bites, each determined to claim victory. At that moment, one of the goblins remembered that the late chief had left some prisoners behind and decided to retrieve them. However, the goblins also recalled that the prison warden was about to return. To everyone's surprise, the creature they were referring to suddenly appeared, a goblin entirely different from the rest. The crowd fell silent as the mysterious figure walked past, his appearance and clothing bearing an uncanny resemblance to humans. Determined to find the captives left behind by the old leader, the goblins decided to follow the warden. One of the goblins mentioned that some of the strongest warriors in the tribe had already gone ahead and that once they began fighting, they would seize the opportunity. Hearing this, the warden became uneasy. Without hesitation, he sprinted toward the captive, as he had heard cries for help. Worried about what might happen to the victim, our protagonist rushed toward the desperate screams. Soon he spotted a cave, the source of the cries. Upon arrival, he found goblins attacking a young woman. One of the goblins locked eyes on the terrified prisoner, while she grew increasingly desperate, convinced that this was the end for her. Overcome with fear, she screamed for help, pleading for someone to save her. The warden, without any intention of harming her, ordered the goblins to release the girl. The apparent leader of the group let go of the captive and informed the warden that the chief was dead, which meant she now belonged to him. The strongest goblin then warned the warden that if he dared to take the girl, there would be dire consequences. Without delay, the leader ordered the others to attack and kill him. Following their leader's command, the goblins charged at the warden, determined to keep the girl for themselves. Cornered by the horde, our protagonist felt a wave of despair, unable to believe that his life might end at the hands of such weak, low-level creatures. Refusing to die like this, his will to survive burned stronger than ever. Then, something unexpected happened. He swiftly drew a dagger and fatally struck one of his attackers, shocking the rest of the goblins. Realizing his determination to fight for his life, the warden made it clear that he wouldn't be defeated so easily. Seeing the blade in his hand, panic set in among the goblins, and they began to flee in terror. One of them shouted for the leader to run, warning that the warden had a weapon. Exhausted but victorious, our hero managed to drive off his attackers. The young woman, who had been moments away from becoming their captive, gratefully thanked her savior. However, the battle had left the warden weak, and she begged him not to die, insisting that she needed him to protect her. As the girl spoke, our protagonist, who was once human, began to reflect. Suddenly, a screen appeared before his eyes, displaying the message, "System initializing." It was then revealed that his name was Lin Tian, and that he had reincarnated as a goblin with a system after being run over by a truck. However, the interface he could see only displayed basic statistics, lacking any truly useful advanced functions. Yet, after saving the girl, he started to gain a clearer understanding of the world he had been reborn into. He began to analyze the land shaped by gods, where numerous powerful monsters roamed. He reaffirmed that humans had claimed their place on the continent through sheer strength. However, the goblin he had reincarnated into was the weakest, most pathetic creature in existence. Lin Tian realized that his stats were so low that even among goblins, he could be easily eliminated. Looking at the young woman, he recalled that in this world, there was one way to grow stronger by creating new life with females. Goblins had the ability to increase their power through constant reproduction, which was why they abducted women. Reflecting on the cruel reality of this world, Lin Tian lamented that he had once been human and found such a method of gaining strength utterly despicable. His thoughts were interrupted when the young woman suddenly spoke. After spending several days with her guardian, she finally understood that he was different, that he didn't want to live like those other goblins. Lin Tian was once again surprised by the girl. At that moment, she told him that when the Order of Knights came to rescue her, she would tell them that he had saved her, and they would allow him to live in the village. However, something suddenly seemed to alarm Lin Tian. He quickly realized that the goblins had returned to capture the girl again. Urging her to hide, he prepared to defend her once more. As expected, a grotesque goblin, desperate to become stronger, arrived screaming, looking as if he had just drunk spoiled milk and urgently needed to relieve himself. Lin Tian was determined not to let the girl be taken. Without hesitation, he swiftly slashed the goblin with his dagger, eliminating the threat. Then, he informed the girl that the humans had arrived to rescue her, filling her with joy. Convinced that it was the Holy Order, she ran toward her supposed saviors. However, Lin Tian suddenly stopped in his tracks as he witnessed something shocking. Before him stood a powerful human warrior, effortlessly cutting down multiple goblins with a single strike. Lin Tian was in awe, seeing someone so overwhelmingly strong in this world. The supposed hero who had come to rescue the girl, however, seemed irritated, realizing that his sacred uniform had been torn by the filthy creatures. Lin Tian then glanced at the warrior's status and was astounded. He had never seen such high stats before, making him question if this man was truly human. Overjoyed, the girl rushed toward her savior, calling him captain, while Lin Tian marveled at how easily they had dispatched the goblins. However, something chilling soon made his blood run cold. It seemed the man had no intention of saving her. Reacting instinctively, Lin Tian sprang into action. Realizing the captain was about to strike the girl down, he leaped forward, grabbing her and pushing her away from danger. Confused and struggling to comprehend the situation, Lin Tian wondered why the Holy Order had come if not to rescue those who had been imprisoned. Furious, the man, named later, expressed his disgust that a mere goblin had managed to dodge his powerful attack. As promised, the girl then informed the captain that this particular goblin had actually protected her. Unexpectedly, later grew enraged, assuming she was lying and trying to make a fool out of him. Without hesitation, he decided to eliminate her. Lin Tian, shocked, rushed once more to save her. Annoyed, he told the girl that she needed to leave immediately and showed her a safe path to escape. Without considering the danger, Lin Tian then chose to attack later using nothing but a crude club. Just as he prepared to strike, a sudden flash of light emerged from the darkness of the cave. Lin Tian froze, eyes wide with shock. A woman appeared, calling out to later to wait. The protagonist found himself encased in a magical barrier, shielding him. A powerful mage had arrived, accompanied by an army of knights. Addressing the captain, she remarked that this goblin seemed rather unusual. The captive girl immediately collapsed to her knees before the woman, calling her the Holy Maiden and begging for protection. Desperate, she pleaded with the mage to save her. The Holy Maiden then turned to Lin Tian and asked if he understood her words. Filled with hope, he realized he was standing before a Freya, the spokesperson of the revered temple, his only chance at escaping this place. With confidence, Lin Tian responded that he understood her. He then explained to the mage that he was not a creature of this world, but had once been human, only to be reincarnated after an accident. Later, observing him closely, admitted that this goblin did appear more intelligent than the others. The mage agreed, stating that the creature before them might be a gift from the Sacred Mother. She then asked Kayla if the goblin had truly not harmed her. The girl confirmed that not only had he spared her, but he had also protected her and even provided her with food. As expected, the Holy Maiden declared that since Lin Tian was so unique, they would take him to the village first and study him thoroughly before making a final decision. Offering a reassuring smile, the mage then turned to Lin Tian and asked if he was willing to go with her. Realizing this was his only chance for survival, he immediately agreed. Once Freya dispelled the magical barrier trapping him, Lin Tian felt relieved. Finally, someone was willing to listen to him, and he would have the chance to prove his innocence. Leaving the cave, the mage ordered later to follow her. Walking alongside his supposed saviors, Lin Tian expressed his gratitude, promising to repay her kindness. But then, something completely unexpected happened. Without warning, later suddenly thrust his sword into Kayla's stomach. Lin Tian turned his head just in time to see his protected companion collapsing lifelessly to the ground. Frozen in disbelief, he watched as the girl, who had placed her faith in her supposed rescuer, lay dead at his feet. Overwhelmed with despair, Lin Tian struggled to understand what was happening, his mind consumed by shock and confusion. Sarcastic and ominous, the Holy Maiden looked at Lin Tian and told him that when they reached the village, he had better reward her properly. A week later, in the village, the church bell rang, summoning the citizens. Standing beside the Holy Maiden, later addressed the villagers, proclaiming that the goblin attack had caused great devastation to their once peaceful town. He declared that the vile creatures had launched a surprise assault, mercilessly slaughtering 30 residents. Enraged, the villagers began shouting, denouncing goblins as despicable beings and reaffirming that humans and those monstrous creatures were mortal enemies. Using images of the slain victims, later proclaimed that, in the name of the temple, the Holy Order had purified the goblins and avenged the fallen townspeople. Taking center stage, the Holy Maiden urged the villagers to continue their devoted prayers to the temple. Reinforcing her words, the mage assured them that the temple would always protect its faithful followers. The gathered villagers then raised their voices in praise of the Holy Order's knights. Meanwhile, in a dimly lit space that resembled a mixture of a laboratory and a shadowy library, the Holy Maiden commented that the sermon had been a great success. She sneered, calling the villagers fools, noting that their blind devotion would now deepen, leading them to offer even more tributes to the temple. It was then that Lin Tian's fate was finally revealed. He was imprisoned, his mouth bound by a muzzle as he called out for the mage. The Holy Maiden gazed at her captive without a trace of compassion. Already missing an eye and seething with rage, Lin Tian cursed her, calling her a wretched monster. The Holy Maiden stood before him, surveying his battered body covered in scars from numerous experiments, and remarked on how impressed she was by his vitality. The fact that he was still alive, she mused, must be the reason the temple had failed to completely eradicate goblins from the continent. Deciding to test her theory further, she opted to inject him with an even stronger poison to observe the results. Lin Tian, enduring endless torment from the experiments, felt as if he couldn't take it anymore. Desperate, he recalled how the Holy Order had deceived everyone and mercilessly killed Kayla. With gritted teeth, he asked the Holy Maiden if this was what humans called justice. Before he could react, a sharp wooden stick was forcefully jammed into his chin. Furious at his defiance, Ifria scoffed, questioning how such a weak and wretched creature dared to challenge human justice. Finally revealing her true nature, she declared that goblins were nothing more than insects on this continent, and that merely speaking to him was already a generous act on her part. Chanting a spell, she told Lin Tian that instead of being ungrateful, he should feel honored to contribute his pathetic existence to the Holy Order's human experiments. A glowing magic circle formed beneath Lin Tian, draining his energy. Nearly powerless to resist, he felt his strength slipping away. He began to blame himself. Despite reincarnating from a human into a low-level goblin, he had foolishly clung to his human compassion, believing in fairness and justice. He recalled how, after being taken to the village, later an Ifria had subjected him to cruel torture and countless experiments, never once listening to a single word he had tried to say. Unfortunately, after enduring unbearable suffering, Lin Tian's body finally gave out. The sadistic Holy Maiden had ended his life. As he passed into the void, Lin Tian's thoughts burned with regret. If he had the chance to do it all over again, he would never trust humans. And if by some miracle he could return, he swore he would crush their bones into dust. Then, something unexpected happened. As he pondered what he would do if given another chance, his surroundings shifted. It felt as though he had entered a virtual space. Confused, he wondered if he was still alive. To his astonishment, a message appeared. The Goblin Life Simulation System had been activated. The system then asked him a simple yet profound question. Would he like to reincarnate again? Trying to understand the situation, Lin Tian quickly deduced that this must be his personal system, one that only activated upon his death. He was in disbelief. He could actually be reborn. However, there was a catch. He would return to the beginning as a weak, low-level goblin once more. He asked the system what yes and no meant. The response was simple. If he refused, he would remain dead. But if he accepted, he would return to a week before his demise, retaining all his current memories. At last, he realized that the second chance he had been desperately praying for had been granted. Filled with overwhelming excitement at the prospect of revenge against later and Ifria, Lin Tian chose yes without hesitation. The system then began the Goblin Life reset process. Consumed by fury and betrayal, he was truly ready to return and claim vengeance. As an added twist, the system informed him that he had been granted a slight power boost upon reincarnation. Although it wasn't much, Lin Tian smirked, knowing that even the smallest advantage was better than nothing. The system then informed Lin Tian that the danger was far from over. The Holy Order was closing in on him, and if he died again, there would be no second resurrection. Alarmed, Lin Tian asked the system what it was capable of doing. The system explained that it could simulate future events with different outcomes every 24 hours. Growing more excited, Lin Tian learned that every simulation would grant him points that he could exchange for items, as well as allow him to glimpse the future. Without hesitation, he commanded the system to begin a life simulation immediately. Following his request, the system generated several options for his escape from the cave. The first option was to alert the other goblins and unite with them to fight Later and his men, which would grant him 10 points. The second option was to abandon the other goblins and escape alone, earning him 5 points. The final option was to hide in the cave and pray that Later and his men wouldn't find him, though this would earn him no points. Lin Tian hesitated, carefully analyzing the first option. Even if he gathered all the goblins, they wouldn't stand a chance against Later alone. Escaping seemed like the best course of action. However, after a quick assessment, he decided to test all options to determine which one would earn him the most points. If he could accumulate enough, he could exchange them for a weapon in the trade shop. Unfortunately, when he tested the first option, both he and the goblins were easily defeated by Later. However, it did grant him 10 points, just as expected. After completing the simulations, Lin Tian concluded that trusting the goblins for survival was a lost cause. However, he was satisfied with the points he had earned. Feeling confident, he asked the system to open the trade shop. Upon viewing the available weapons, he was astonished. There were powerful items, but they required an immense amount of points to obtain. His eyes then landed on a lightweight elven dagger, quick and efficient, costing exactly the 10 points he had acquired. Lin Tian immediately purchased it, gaining a 10% speed boost and a 15% increase in strength. He noted that the blade was incredibly sharp. If he struck a vital point, it would be lethal. Concerned for his friend, Lin Tian asked the system why he hadn't seen Kayla in the simulation. He demanded to know where she was. The system responded that, after his reincarnation, certain details of the timeline had changed. In this new life, Kayla had never been captured by the goblins. She was living safely and happily in the village. Lin Tian was stunned by the revelation. A genuine sense of relief washed over him, knowing that she was out of harm's way. Feeling that he had kept his promise to protect her, he turned his focus to his other priorities. Determined, he analyzed the best escape route. Lin Tian sprinted toward the cave's exit, convinced that this was the safest option, as the weakest guards were stationed there. Outside, 2 soldiers stood watch. One complained about how much he hated goblins, while the other reminded him to be patient, as this was an easy job. Hearing their conversation, Lin Tian quickly realized the truth. Later's real plan was to eliminate all the captive girls in the cave. That was the guard's mission. Fury boiled inside Lin Tian. His resolve for vengeance only grew stronger. The Holy Order was willing to slaughter innocent people just to maintain their influence. If they could do this to humans, he could only imagine what they would do to a mere goblin like himself. Realizing that fighting was his only option, he set a trap. Imitating a girl's voice, he cried out for help from inside the cave. Obeying Later's orders, one of the guards prepared to execute the supposed captive as soon as she stepped out. Wearing a deceitful smile, the guard reassured the girl that it was safe to come out, claiming he was there to take her back to the village. But before the soldier could react, Lin Tian struck, plunging his new super dagger into the man's body. Overcome with rage toward humans, he showed no mercy. As the soldier trembled in pain, Lin Tian coldly declared that from this moment on, this would be the goblin's revenge. The wounded soldier collapsed, his body shaking violently. Meanwhile, the second guard, noticing the delay, called out to his comrade, demanding to know why he was taking so long. Unaware of what had just transpired, he stepped forward. Lin Tian, now fully committed to his vengeance, grinned. His plan was working. Without hesitation, he rushed toward the second guard, his razor-sharp dagger glinting in the dim light. The soldier, now realizing something was wrong, panicked, scrambling to understand the situation. Before he could react, Lin Tian struck him with a swift blow to the face, sending him reeling backward. Moving with deadly precision, Lin Tian lunged at him, fueled by his burning hatred. As the soldier staggered, trying to recover, Lin Tian pounced, launching a relentless attack, just as he had envisioned. The dagger was indeed incredibly sharp, and Lin Tian managed to land a deep cut on the soldier as he struck. The wounded guard collapsed to the ground, trembling in fear, convinced that this was his end. Desperate, the soldier looked up at Lin Tian and asked if he could understand the human language. Seizing the moment, the guard began begging for mercy, pleading with Lin Tian not to kill him. Attempting to manipulate the young goblin's emotions, the soldier pulled out a picture of his family, claiming they were waiting for him back home. Noticing Lin Tian hesitating, the soldier realized that he could indeed understand human speech. Seizing the opportunity, the guard flattered Lin Tian, calling him intelligent and insisting that he had only been following the Holy Order's commands. With a deceptive smile, the soldier attempted to gain Lin Tian's trust by promising him gold and fresh, young women, hoping to distract him long enough to strike. Under the guise of surrender, he slowly reached for his weapon, believing Lin Tian was too absorbed in his words to notice. Then, like a treacherous rat, he lunged at Lin Tian, calling him a stupid beast, but something unexpected happened. Before the soldier could even complete his attack, Lin Tian, moving with inhuman speed, struck first. His enchanted dagger pierced the treacherous guard's body, silencing him before he could react. With this, Lin Tian had begun the first step of his vengeance. This time, he was fully determined to take advantage of his last chance in this world, one where humans had betrayed him. His confidence in his inevitable revenge grew stronger. Just then, he heard Later's voice in the distance, realizing that the captain was approaching. Knowing he had little time, Lin Tian quickly set his next plan into motion. He stripped the fallen guard of his uniform and grabbed the soldier's clothes. Clutching the fabric tightly, he muttered to himself, promising that he would soon face Later and Ifria. Meanwhile, Later and the Holy Maiden arrived at the scene where Lin Tian had slain the two guards. Later narrowed his eyes, questioning whether goblins could have really been responsible for taking down trained soldiers. Ifria, on the other hand, was intrigued. If a goblin had managed such a feat, it could be a mutant. Later scowled, knowing that if such a rumor spread through the village, the consequences would be disastrous. Frustrated, he stomped on the corpse of one of the fallen guards, cursing him for being useless against a single goblin. Ifria, however, seemed excited by the possibility of encountering something unique. With a twisted expression, she licked her lips and murmured that if they captured this goblin, she would have so much fun experimenting on it. Her sinister gaze and almost euphoric anticipation sent chills through the air. She was practically thrilled at the thought of capturing something new. Elsewhere, deep within the forest, Lin Tian had successfully escaped the cave. Relieved, he devoured his food, replenishing his strength, and vowed to handle his enemies the goblin way, by using ruthless cunning and savage instincts to grow stronger. With a dark glint in his eyes, he whispered that in this life, every man would beg for death, and every woman would yearn for him and weep at his feet. Suddenly, a rustling sound came from the nearby bushes. Lin Tian's sharp instincts warned him that Later's men might still be tracking him. He clenched his dagger, preparing for another fight. A hooded figure emerged from the undergrowth. Without hesitation, Lin Tian lunged at the intruder, refusing to give them a chance to retaliate. Startled, the stranger stumbled backward, tripping over a rock. Lin Tian halted in shock. It was a goblin. For the first time, he stood frozen in disbelief, staring at a fellow goblin who seemed different from the others. What stunned him even more was that this goblin could speak, just like him. Still wary, Lin Tian kept his guard up. The stranger was an intruder, and he had no idea if they could be trusted. But then, something even more astonishing caught his attention. He observed the goblin's features carefully, his eyes widening. This goblin was female. Lin Tian was completely bewildered. Goblins were supposed to be only male, which was why they could only reproduce with other species. Why did this one look so different? The frightened female goblin raised her hands defensively, her voice trembling as she begged Lin Tian not to hurt her. She explained that she had only come to the forest to fetch water and meant no harm. However, Lin Tian remained suspicious. It was hard to believe that a goblin could speak so fluently and form complete sentences. Driven by curiosity, he used his system interface to examine her status. What he saw made his heart pound in excitement. The system revealed that if a male goblin were to reproduce with a female of their own species, he would evolve into a goblin god. Lin Tian was awestruck. He had just stumbled upon the perfect opportunity to grow strong enough to defeat his enemies. Meanwhile, the female goblin, still terrified for her life, quickly explained that she had been sent by her leader to collect water, and that if she returned empty-handed, she would be beaten to death. Just then, she gasped in shock, not because of what she had said, but because she finally realized that Lin Tian, a goblin like her, was speaking to her. Lin Tian, noticing her amazement, calmly warned her that if she continued crying so loudly, she would attract Later and his men. The female goblin, now completely fascinated, wiped her tears and hesitantly asked if Lin Tian could really speak like a human. Lin Tian smirked slightly. Yes, he answered. Lin Tian recalled that goblins normally did not speak coherently, which explained why the female goblin before him had not spoken much with her own tribe. Grateful for his kindness, she told him that he was very different. Most goblins would have beaten or insulted her instead. Then, she hesitantly asked if he would like to come with her to her village. Once again, Lin Tian saw an opportunity to grow stronger. His excitement spiked as he questioned the girl about whether there was really a goblin tribe nearby. However, he remained cautious. He was unsure if Later and his men were still tracking him. Prioritizing his safety, he concluded that now was not the time to take risks. Instead, he would stick to his plan for revenge and strengthen himself first. Decisively, Lin Tian told the female goblin that he would go with her to the goblin village. Focused on his goal, he realized that he had been wondering where he could find subordinates to recruit. This tribe might be the perfect answer. He instructed the goblin girl to take him to her village. As they arrived, the goblins in the village noticed the unfamiliar presence. Curiously, they watched Lin Tian from a distance. However, their curiosity quickly turned into mockery as they saw his human-like attire. Laughing, they ridiculed him, calling him a strange creature for dressing like a human. Lin Tian, however, saw this as a perfect opportunity to begin his revenge. Determined to gain the goblins' trust, he declared that he was here to join them and requested to speak with their leader. The goblins, still laughing, mocked him further, claiming that their chief was not someone he could meet just because he wanted to. Irritated, Lin Tian's new companion shouted at the goblins, insisting that he was not a bad person and that they shouldn't act so rashly. At that moment, a deep voice interrupted the commotion. A goblin demanded to know why the tribe was gathering in one place and making such a scene. Lin Tian's eyes lit up. The chief had finally arrived. The goblin leader stepped forward, furious, demanding to know who was responsible for causing such a disturbance in his tribe. Without hesitation, Lin Tian quickly analyzed the chief's status using his system. His eyes widened in shock. This goblin was much stronger than any he had encountered before. The chief turned to the female goblin and asked if she was the one who had brought the outsider. She nervously admitted that she had taken Lin Tian to the village because he had nowhere else to go. To Lin Tian's surprise, the chief smirked. Rather than welcoming him, the chief issued a brutal command. "Kill him." The goblins immediately charged at Lin Tian, weapons raised, ready to tear him apart. The female goblin gasped in horror, pleading for them to stop. But Lin Tian was ready. Without hesitation, he drew his dagger. Holding up his enchanted blade, he boldly addressed the chief and the surrounding goblins. He told them that he knew how to forge weapons just like his dagger and that if they let him join the tribe, he could make them all stronger. Intrigued, the chief raised a hand, halting the attack. Slowly stepping toward Lin Tian, the goblin leader eyed him with undeniable greed. The chief admitted that Lin Tian did not seem to be lying and asked what kind of weapons he could create. Putting his plan into motion, Lin Tian confidently stated that if they provided him with iron he could forge simple iron weapons. Over time, he could craft even stronger weapons. To convince them further, Lin Tian added that with these daggers, the goblins could slay monsters and even humans. His words sent a wave of excitement through the tribe. The goblins cheered, shouting that with such weapons, they would finally have meat to eat and would no longer have to hide in the forest. They even joked about how much fresher elf meat would taste. Greedy for power, the chief smirked at Lin Tian and declared that he would give him a chance. He commanded the goblins to gather iron for 3 days so Lin Tian could forge weapons. However, he issued a warning: if Lin Tian failed, he would be executed. Then, pointing at the female goblin, the chief added that she would die as well if Lin Tian failed. With that, the chief walked away, leaving the tribe buzzing with excitement. As the crowd dispersed, Lin Tian turned to the female goblin and embraced her. Shaking his head, he muttered that the old man was ruthless, willing to sacrifice his own kind without hesitation. Now, he had no choice. He needed to craft weapons not just to buy time but to become stronger. With a determined gaze, Lin Tian set off toward his new objective. Accompanied by several goblins, he and his new companion journeyed into the wild. searching for iron ore. As they traveled, the female goblin suddenly slowed down, her breathing heavy. She pleaded for a short break, saying she was exhausted from walking all day. Annoyed, one of the goblins scoffed and kicked her to the ground. Furious, the goblin warrior towered over her, calling her ugly and threatening to kill her if she didn't find the ore. The female goblin cowered, promising not to complain again. Seeing this, the other goblins laughed, joining in. They began beating her, calling her lazy and useless. Lin Tian's expression darkened. Without hesitation, he grabbed a rock and hurled it at one of the goblins, striking him in the head. Silence fell over the group. Lin Tian glared at them, his dagger gleaming in his hand. In a cold, commanding voice, he reminded them that they were here to find iron ore, not to fight each other. Seething with rage, Lin Tian warned them that if they wanted to live, they would start obeying him. Otherwise, they would all die by his blade. A chill ran through the goblins. Realizing that Lin Tian was not bluffing, the once arrogant goblins shook with fear. From this moment on, they understood Lin Tian was not just any goblin. He was something far more dangerous. The goblins quickly backed away from the female goblin, muttering that Lin Tian would probably kill her himself once he finished forging iron weapons. Some even threatened him, warning that once he completed his task, the chief would never let him live. Lin Tian felt uneasy. They were right. Even if he succeeded in forging weapons within 3 days, it was only a matter of time before the chief decided to eliminate him. Turning to Lua, who was trembling in fear, Lin Tian remembered something crucial. If a male goblin were to mate with a female of his own species, he could become a legendary goblin god. Seeing her cower in fear, Lin Tian softly told her not to cry. Calling her Lua, he gently reached for her face, trying to calm her down. Looking into her eyes, he asked if she wanted to stay with him. If she accepted, he promised to protect her, feed her, and give her a safe place to live. She would never have to suffer abuse again. Determined to grow stronger, Lin Tian assured Lua that he always kept his promises. However, they were still too weak to fight. He begged her to help him become stronger. Hopeful that she could escape the torment of her tribe, Lua nervously asked how they could do that. Lin Tian calmly explained that if she was willing to have children with him, it would grant him great power, allowing him to fulfill his promise of protecting her. Blushing and confused, Lua admitted that she had never mated with a male before. Determined to convince her, Lin Tian gently reassured her that if she agreed, she wouldn't have to worry, he would take care of everything. Then, something unexpected happened. Without hesitation, Lin Tian moved closer and kissed her. Taking her hands in his, he prepared to embrace the ritual. Wanting to help her only friend, Lua whispered that she was ready. As soon as they bonded, the system activated. A message appeared, informing Lin Tian that he and Lua would have 7 offspring, increasing his level cap. Additionally, the system granted him +9 attack, +100 HP, and +10 defense. A sudden surge of energy rushed through Lin Tian's body. His physique changed entirely. His muscles became more defined, his strength skyrocketed, and his stats improved significantly. Inspecting his new form, Lin Tian clenched his fists in excitement. Not only had he grown stronger, but he had physically transformed. Now, he had a real chance at defeating the goblin priest. Discarding his now too small clothes, Lin Tian embraced Lua once more. He assured her that she belonged to him now and that he would protect her, no matter what. Looking at him with admiration, Lua gazed into his eyes and called him kind. But before they could celebrate, they heard screams for help. It was the goblins sent to collect iron, or they were being attacked. Lin Tian and Lua turned toward the chaos, spotting a massive magical wolf chasing a goblin. The poor creature ran frantically, clutching something in his arms. Lin Tian's eyes widened. The goblins had found iron ore, but they had also found trouble. Fulfilling his promise to protect Lua, Lin Tian told her to stay back while he dealt with the wolf. The massive beast lunged, baring its fangs as it prepared to devour a goblin. But before it could strike, Lin Tian rushed forward, moving with inhuman speed. Dagger in hand, he slashed across the wolf's throat in a single precise motion. Blood splattered as the creature collapsed, lifeless. The goblin holding the iron ore froze in disbelief. Lin Tian had killed the beast in one strike. As he absorbed the wolf's magical energy, Lin Tian turned to the goblin and praised him for successfully finding the ore. Inspecting the material's quality, Lin Tian nodded in satisfaction. Ordering the goblins to gather more, he told them that once they had enough, they would begin forging weapons. After collecting the necessary resources, Lin Tian and his group returned to the village. As they arrived, the goblins watched in awe. Lin Tian had actually created an iron weapon. To prove its effectiveness, Lin Tian demonstrated its power, showing that his weapon could cut through even the toughest beasts. Then he revealed his latest creation, a spear forged from the iron ore they had gathered. Excited, one of the goblins, now noticeably stronger after the hunt, confirmed to the tribe that he had personally seen Lin Tian defeat the magical wolf. Hearing this, Lin Tian raised the spear and asked the goblins if they wanted more weapons like this. The crowd erupted in cheers. However, the chief looked uneasy. The young outsider was gaining too much influence. Taking control of the situation, the goblin priest struck his staff against the ground. Looking directly at Lin Tian, the chief acknowledged his success, admitting that he had not lied about his abilities. However, he made it clear that if Lin Tian wanted to stay in the tribe, it wouldn't be easy. If he truly wanted to prove himself, he would have to forge 50 spears in just 2 days. An almost impossible task. The goblins began grumbling, comparing Lin Tian to humans, mocking that he was weak. However, Lin Tian felt pleased. His plan to win over the goblins was working. To the chief's shock, Lin Tian completed the task. All 50 spears had been forged on time. Standing before the goblin priest, Lin Tian confidently declared that he had fulfilled his end of the bargain. The goblins, thrilled by his success, cheered loudly. Surprisingly, even the chief praised him, acknowledging his accomplishment. Then, in a grand gesture, the priest declared that, in honor of Lin Tian's official acceptance into the tribe, everyone would feast on meat. The goblins roared in excitement. They were overjoyed at the rare chance to indulge in a true feast. Everything was going according to plan. As the goblins celebrated, Lua approached Lin Tian, holding a piece of roasted meat. She smiled warmly, explaining that it was a special gift from the priest himself. Trusting the offering, Lin Tian accepted the food and began eating. However, something felt off. His stomach twisted, his throat burned, his vision blurred. Something was wrong. Concerned, Lua panicked, asking if he was okay. Lin Tian couldn't breathe. As he choked, the chief stepped forward, a cruel grin on his face. Lua froze in terror. With mocking laughter, the chief called Lin Tian a fool for trusting him. He had seen through Lin Tian's ambitions. He knew that the young goblin was too dangerous to keep around. Defying his rule would only lead to one thing: death. Grinning wickedly, the chief grabbed Lua by the head, yanking her toward him. Seeing Lin Tian struggle, the chief taunted him, asking if he truly cared about this female. If so, he should watch closely because he was about to slit her throat. Lua gasped, realizing she was about to die. This was it, her end. But then, something unexpected happened. Lin Tian moved, fast. With a burst of energy, he slashed through the chief's arm, freeing Lua. The entire tribe fell silent. The chief, once so confident, now stood wide-eyed in fear. How was this possible? Lin Tian should have been paralyzed from the poison. With a smirk, Lin Tian mocked the old goblin, calling him a fool. He had known from the beginning that the chief would try to poison him. So, he had played along, letting the old man believe his plan was working. Realizing he had been outsmarted, the chief seethed with rage. Even with one arm missing, he was determined to kill Lin Tian. With a furious roar, the priest lunged. At the same time, Lin Tian prepared to counter. The battle was set. Lin Tian, now faster and stronger, dodged the chief's attacks effortlessly. Moving with deadly precision, he struck again, wounding the old goblin further. The priest staggered. This was it, the execution. Lin Tian moved in for the final blow. With a swift, clean strike, he severed the chief's head. The goblin priest, dead. The tribe fell into chaos. The monstrous goblins trembled, staring in horror at their decapitated leader. What would happen now? Then, Lin Tian stepped forward. With confidence, he declared that, from now on, he was the new leader of the tribe. Silence. Then, he raised his dagger and shouted his first command. Under his rule, they would march against the elves and humans. They would never go hungry again. They would have all the meat they desired. The goblins erupted in cheers. They had found a new chief. Then, with a cruel smile, Lin Tian pointed to the old priest's corpse. As a gift to his warriors, he offered them the remains of their fallen leader. Like starving animals, the goblins rushed in. Mad with hunger, they devoured their former chief, tearing him apart piece by piece. Watching the carnage, Lin Tian felt satisfied. This was only the beginning of his revenge. Next, he would make the elves breed a stronger generation for his tribe. But something else was watching him, hidden in the shadows. A mysterious presence. Then the figure was revealed, a beautiful elf. From behind the thick foliage, she had watched everything. She had seen it all. Far away, a magnificent structure stood within a colossal tree. A warning was placed at its entrance: goblins impaled on stakes. A young elf smiled as she saw her princess return home. This spy was no ordinary elf. She was royalty. As the elf princess entered her home, she was greeted by one of her attendants. The girl informed her that the matriarch was currently occupied. However, the princess insisted she had urgent news. Then, she stepped into her mother's chamber. What she witnessed inside was unexpected. There, before her, was Queen Cassana, and she was being courted by multiple male elves. At that moment, the elf princess felt a wave of embarrassment as she witnessed her mother's shameless display with the male elves. Meanwhile, an unknown threat loomed ever closer. Before Queen Cassana could leave her chamber, she paused and instructed her daughter to explain what was so urgent that she had barged in so suddenly. Maintaining her composure, the princess informed her mother that she had an important report regarding the goblin tribe in the forest. With a curious yet arrogant expression, the queen tilted her head and mockingly asked what could possibly be so concerning about such weak and filthy creatures. Without hesitation, the princess revealed that she had found the devoured remains of a massive black bear deep within the magical forest. She doubted that goblins alone could have taken down such a powerful beast. Furthermore, she reported that just days ago, she had personally witnessed the previous goblin chief being slain by a mysterious young warrior. She couldn't shake the feeling that these events were connected. However, her mother barely reacted to the warning. She had only heard rumors about a new goblin leader. Still, even in her arrogance, she ordered her daughter to gather a squad of elven soldiers and prepare a mission to investigate any potential threat. With a smirk, the queen advised her daughter not to kill all the goblins immediately. Caressing one of the elven males, the seductive queen remarked that goblin hearts were valuable ingredients for the potions used in their tribe. Once again, the elf princess felt deeply embarrassed by her mother's behavior. She sighed, acknowledging the importance of keeping some goblins alive. With a playful tone, the queen then praised her daughter's hard work over the years and, as a reward, offered to gift her an elf for her personal pleasure, or even more than one if she desired. Feeling completely flustered by her mother's shameless proposal, the princess quickly excused herself from the room. Before leaving, she confirmed that she would conduct a night reconnaissance and report back with further details. Meanwhile, in the goblin camp, using branches as markers, Lin Tian and his warriors constructed a map of their next target: the Forest of 1,000 Wonders. According to the scouting report, there were around 30 treehouses in the area. Pleased with the thorough work of his most trusted soldier, Lin Tian grinned and declared that once they conquered the elves, he would reward him with 2 elf women. The goblin soldier's eyes lit up with excitement. Motivated by the promise, he assured Lin Tian that he would order the other goblins to prepare their weapons. Now, the new chief began finalizing his attack strategy. Based on the intelligence gathered, he estimated that there were 2 elves per house, totaling around 70 elves, with an additional 10 stationed in the mines. Before launching the attack, Lin Tian issued a new decree. From now on, the goblins would hunt within the magical forest. A wave of excitement swept through the tribe. By hunting continuously, they could boost their attributes and gain new abilities. Over time, both Lin Tian and Lua hunted relentlessly, taking down magical beasts and accumulating more power. The goblins also perfected their group hunting tactics, targeting larger creatures and gaining collective stat boosts through their devour ability. After days of relentless hunting, the goblin tribe had grown significantly stronger. Their average level had risen to 18, and their combined power had reached 250. Analyzing his findings, Lin Tian calculated that each individual elf warrior had a power level of around 200. This meant that, on paper, the goblins had now surpassed the elves in strength. Still, he knew better than to rush in blindly. Before committing to an attack, he decided to run a battle simulation. Activating the Goblin Life Simulation System, Lin Tian tested the outcome of the upcoming invasion. In the simulation, Lin Tian confidently led his goblin army into battle. But something went horribly wrong. Due to his overconfidence, his troops walked directly into an ambush. The goblins were slaughtered. Lin Tian himself was captured by the elven matriarch and hanged in the Forest of 1,000 Wonders as a warning to all goblins. As the simulation ended, a chilling message appeared. Lin Tian thought he had everything under control, but in reality, he was dancing in the palm of the elf's hands. Lin Tian's eyes widened. He couldn't believe the outcome. After reviewing the simulation's data, he came to a harsh realization. The elves had been monitoring the goblins all along. That's how they had orchestrated the ambush so perfectly. Narrowing his eyes, Lin Tian issued new orders. Using their enhanced senses, he commanded the goblins to search for clues. If there was a spy, they would find them. Focusing his magical energy, Lin Tian scanned the surroundings. Then, under the moonlight, he detected something hidden. With stealth and precision, he pinpointed a figure lurking behind a tree. The spy had been found. Without realizing her cover was blown, the elf princess and her soldiers began retreating. They needed to report back to the matriarch. An attack was imminent. Then, suddenly, a flurry of glowing arrows rained down upon them. One arrow struck true, right into the princess's backside. Kasana let out a loud, desperate scream. She couldn't believe what had just happened. At that moment, the elf princess felt a wave of embarrassment. The beautiful elf princess trembled in fear as she realized that she was completely paralyzed by the venomous arrow. The same fate had befallen her soldiers, leaving them helpless as well. Meanwhile, the goblins cheered, praising Lin Tian for successfully capturing an elf. Concerned, Lin Tian examined Kasana's body, wondering if her reaction was due to the poison. With a smirk, he mocked the helpless princess, remarking that he hadn't expected capturing them to be this easy. Satisfied that his plan had gone even better than expected, Lin Tian grinned and told Kasana that they had arrived at the perfect time. Then he gave the order, "Take all the elven prisoners back to the goblin village." Once at the goblin settlement, one of the goblins shouted excitedly, calling for water to be thrown on the captured elf, announcing that the chief had arrived. Kasana, now completely weakened, lay motionless on the ground. Lin Tian approached her, his expression unreadable. With mocking amusement, he remarked that it seemed the bodily fluids of goblins had an unexpected effect on elf women. Paralysis and heightened sensitivity. This, he noted, was an advantage against the matriarchal elves. Despite her weak state, Kasana's eyes burned with rage. How dare these filthy creatures capture her and plan to attack the elven tribe? With gritted teeth, she hissed at Lin Tian, claiming that without her mother's mercy, the elves would have exterminated the goblins long ago. She warned him that if they harmed her, the elven matriarch would never forgive them. Lin Tian laughed. Unfazed, he mocked the princess, then shoved her to the ground. Feigning curiosity, he remarked that her talk of mercy was interesting. Then he leaned in. "The elves you speak so highly of," he whispered, "and the ones your soldiers describe, seem quite different." He smirked. "Your warriors may be dumb, but they don't lie." His golden eyes glowed as he continued. "The elves could have wiped out the goblins in this forest long ago," he pointed out, "but there are still plenty of us left. And I don't think that's because of mercy." With full confidence in his victory, Lin Tian grinned. "There's no need for you to say anything else," he said. "Tonight, my goblins will visit your people." Then he turned to his soldiers. "Divide up the 2 dead prisoners and devour their skills." Satisfied with his preparations, he fixed his gaze on Kasana once more. "And as for you," Kasana's breath hitched. She hadn't fully processed what was happening. Then the realization hit her. Her eyes widened in terror. Desperately, she begged for mercy. But it was too late. With Kasana's defeat, Lin Tian's stats skyrocketed, granting him new abilities. Meanwhile, back at the elven tribe, the matriarch was occupied. Her attendants, visibly exhausted, pleaded for a break. They couldn't keep up with her endless desires. The stimulant potion had run out. Annoyed, the queen lamented that they should have captured more goblins the last time they went hunting. Some of her most exhausted attendants barely had the strength to stand. Still, the queen's attention shifted. She turned to another elf soldier and asked about Kasana's whereabouts. The warrior reported that the princess had not yet returned. With a raised brow, the matriarch pondered for a moment. The same soldier offered to go search for her, suggesting they eliminate a few goblins along the way to strengthen their warriors. Though unconcerned at first, the queen nodded. "Take some men with you," she ordered. But before he could leave, someone burst into the room. With a panicked expression, they shouted, "Your daughter is not coming back. The matriarch stiffened. Her eyes narrowed as she demanded to know who had spoken. Then, from the darkness, an arrow flew. It pierced straight through the forehead of her subordinate. The matriarch barely had time to react, her reflexes barely saving her from another incoming arrow. Snatching the projectile from midair, she gritted her teeth and looked up. There, standing before her, was Lin Tian. Flanked by his most loyal warriors, he smirked at the elven queen. "I've captured your daughter," he said casually, "and soon Kasana will bear my children." The room fell silent. Lin Tian grinned, his voice dripping with mockery. "So that means we're family now." The matriarch's face darkened. Fury boiled inside her. Without hesitation, she grabbed a blade. The time for talk was over. Lin Tian watched with amusement as the elven queen charged at him. "Finally taking me seriously, huh?" he taunted. The matriarch swung her sword, aiming to end him immediately. But Lin Tian was faster. With ease, he dodged every one of her attacks. Then, with a calm smirk, he made his next move. "You're already surrounded," he said. "If you surrender now, I might show mercy." The queen's eyes flickered. For the first time, she noticed the goblins closing in. Then her body froze. A sharp sting ran through her veins. Lin Tian chuckled. "You feel that?" he asked. "The arrow that grazed you was covered in goblin venom." Paralysis. The realization dawned on her. She had been captured. The matriarch staggered, her legs barely holding her weight. Lin Tian stepped forward. "You mentioned upgrade tools and stimulants earlier," he mused. "I see. So that's what goblins were used for all this time." Her face paled. His blade hovered near her throat. For the first time, she saw it clearly, the true leader of the goblins. The very one Kasana had warned her about, and she had ignored it. Then, from outside the treetop palace, desperate screams echoed. The matriarch's eyes darted toward the window. Lin Tian grabbed her arm, dragging her forward. "Take a look," he whispered. She gasped. Below, the elven village was in chaos. Her people were being overrun. Lin Tian's golden eyes gleamed as he leaned closer. "Shall we talk about cooperation now?" At that moment, the elven queen stood frozen in disbelief, her gaze fixed on the chaos unfolding outside her chambers. The cries of her people filled the air, desperate voices pleading for her to save them from the goblins. The fear in their voices made her heart pound, but there was nothing she could do. As the matriarch's desperation grew, she turned to Lin Tian, her eyes burning with fury, demanding to know what he had done to her village. With a calm smirk, Lin Tian informed her that the goblins were no longer weaker than the elves. He mocked her arrogance, reminding her that when her tribe was powerful, they slaughtered goblins without mercy. Now that the tables had turned, it was only natural for the goblins to take their revenge. He then explained that he needed strong goblin warriors and that elves were still useful to him. What would happen to them after they had served their purpose would depend entirely on the matriarch's actions. At last, the proud elven queen broke. Her rage turned to fear as she fell to her knees, her once dignified posture shattered. With tears in her eyes, she begged for mercy. She pleaded for her children's lives, offering complete surrender in exchange for their survival. Seeing her in this pitiful state, Lin Tian grinned. The mighty queen, who once looked down on goblins, was now kneeling before him. With a defeated sigh, she agreed to remain in the goblin village, allowing her elf daughters to bear goblin offspring, strengthening the tribe. Back at the goblin settlement, Kasana's heart shattered as she saw her mother kneeling before the goblins. She had warned her, but the queen had refused to believe in the possibility of defeat. Now, her worst fears had come true. The matriarch, still filled with regret, apologized to her daughter for failing to protect their people. She admitted that only defenseless women and children remained, as most of their warriors had fallen. Then, with a forced sense of calm, she whispered a reassurance. All the elf women had already played with the goblins, so their lives would be spared. Though Kasana trembled with shame, the queen remained composed. She explained that the only way to survive now was to accept their fate within the goblin tribe. Lin Tian, ever calculating, reassured the matriarch and her daughter that he would take care of all of them. He promised 3 meals a day, but if anyone tried to betray him, he would show no mercy. Understanding that defying him would mean certain death, the matriarch lowered her gaze and silently accepted his rule. Then, with a cautious expression, the queen made a request. "They are all my children," she said. "Please, will you take care of them?" Not long after, Lua struggled to manage the countless elven and goblin children running around the village. Lin Tian observed her, realizing that the elven matriarch's motherly instincts were likely a result of the infinite maternal love attribute that elves possessed. Seeing Lua overwhelmed, she called out to the tribal leader, asking for help. Lin Tian sighed, finally accepting the matriarch's request. He would allow her to care for the elf children, confident that they would grow strong and become assets to the tribe in the future. With his mind focused on power, Lin Tian accessed his system, analyzing his latest statistics. He pondered whether his qualifications had reached their peak, as every value obtained was being directly converted into attributes. At that moment, he reached a realization: he only needed to continue having offspring to increase his power directly. Looking at his growing goblin empire, everything was progressing as planned. With his current strength, Lin Tian was certain that he was finally ready to finish off later. As time passed, more elf-goblin hybrid babies were born. However, as the elf mothers gazed upon their monstrous offspring, many of them cried out in horror. Some pleaded for the goblins to take the terrifying creatures away from them. Curious about their numbers, Lin Tian turned to Lua and asked how many had been born so far. She hesitated before answering, between 30 and 40. Before Lin Tian could process that information, Kasana suddenly screamed. Clutching her stomach, she fell to her knees, trembling with pain. Lin Tian's eyes darkened. Kasana was pregnant with his child. Without wasting a second, he rushed to her side. The princess wailed in agony, her hands digging into the ground as she struggled to endure the intense pain of childbirth. The elven queen, now deeply concerned for her daughter, hurriedly knelt beside her, desperately trying to help. "Don't panic, my child," the queen whispered, her voice trembling. Overcome with fear, she turned to Lin Tian, her once proud gaze filled with desperation. "Please," she pleaded, "help her. This is her first birth. I beg you." Lin Tian, feeling a strange sense of responsibility, nodded. Turning to Lua, he gave an order. "Spread her legs," he commanded, preparing to assist. The elven queen stiffened. "Do you even know what you're doing?" she asked, her voice filled with doubt. Lin Tian smirked. "I know enough," he replied. But Kasana, still writhing in pain, refused to believe him. Through gritted teeth, she screamed, "I don't want your help." Annoyed by her resistance, Lin Tian's expression darkened. "Shut up," he growled. "That child is mine too." With determined hands, he helped her through the birth, ensuring both mother and child survived. After what felt like an eternity, the cries of a newborn filled the air. Kasana's breathing was heavy, but she was alive. Lua, watching the entire event unfold, smiled in admiration. "You're incredible," she whispered. "You saved her life." Lin Tian, humble as ever, simply responded, "It was nothing." But before anyone could relax, a sudden commotion erupted outside. Goblins screamed. An elf woman was wailing in terror. Lin Tian turned his head sharply, his eyes narrowing. Approaching the source of the disturbance, he saw a group of goblins surrounding a newly born elf mother. She was pleading for help, her body weak from childbirth. The goblins, eager to take her by force, closed in. Lin Tian's expression darkened. With cold authority, he drew his dagger. "Step back," he ordered, his voice sharp. The goblins hesitated, looking at their leader in confusion. Lin Tian glared at them. "Wait until the females have fully recovered," he stated. "Otherwise, you will face the consequences." The goblins trembled, understanding his words well. For now, they had no choice but to obey. This war was not over yet, and Lin Tian had only just begun. At that moment, Lin Tian gave a new order. From now on, each elf would receive an extra portion of fruit in addition to their regular meals. Amazed by his actions, the elven matriarch observed him with intrigue and finally admitted that he was truly different from ordinary goblins. In response, Lin Tian simply stated that the better they behaved, the better their treatment would be. Once again, Lin Tian decided to use the simulation system to visualize his future revenge plan. The system generated a projection of events, revealing that after great effort, he fully conquered the elven tribe and impregnated all the elven women, leading to the birth of goblins with superior attributes. Seeing the rapid expansion of his forces, Lin Tian eventually set his sights on Later and the others, infiltrating Bright Town alone and tracking down his enemies. Upon analyzing the simulations data, the system presented Lin Tian with 3 strategic choices, each with different success ratings. Pondering the results, Lin Tian questioned whether he had truly found Later, reminding himself that his current strength was nearly equal to his rivals. However, he knew better than to underestimate Later's allies. Believing that his current stats would allow him to defeat Later with ease, Lin Tian selected the first option, attacking alone. The simulation played out his decision. Lin Tian tracked down Later, launching a direct assassination attempt. He almost succeeded in eliminating him, until an unexpected presence appeared. The Sword Saint, Later's master, arrived just in time. Before Lin Tian could even react, the human sword maiden saved Later and killed him instantly. In the aftermath, Later's group returned to the capital and was never seen again. Summarizing the brutal failure, the system informed Lin Tian that against the Sword Saint, there was no chance of escape. He would need to be more cautious moving forward. Lin Tian stared at the simulation results in disbelief. The sheer power of the Sword Saint was unfathomable. Why would someone so strong appear in such a small city? Turning his gaze toward the elven matriarch, Lin Tian became more convinced than ever that he needed to accelerate his path to absolute power. Seeing no alternative, he made his decision. He informed Lua that he needed to leave for human territory for a few days, placing her in charge of the goblin tribe in his absence. The matriarch, however, hesitated. Worry crept into her expression. "If you die, what will happen to the goblins?" she asked. Lin Tian simply smirked. "You know about my grudge against the humans," he replied. Unexpectedly, the elven matriarch then offered to cast a stealth enchantment on him. Satisfied, Lin Tian grinned. "That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say," he admitted. He was pleasantly surprised by her willingness to assist him. He jokingly remarked, "I didn't expect you to actually care about my safety." The queen sighed, crossing her arms. "I don't," she retorted. "I just fear what will happen if you die and the goblins are left without a leader." Her tone hardened as she reminded him, all her children were in this village. If Lin Tian survived, they would all remain safe. Standing beside her, Lua assured him that she would protect the tribe in his absence. Satisfied, Lin Tian set off toward his objective. Upon arriving in Bright Town, he observed the bustling city streets. People moved about peacefully, while soldiers patrolled the area. At first glance, it seemed like a normal security patrol. However, as Lin Tian observed the high number of stationed guards, a nagging thought crept into his mind. Was the Sword Saint already here? Recalling his day of gathering information, Lin Tian realized something strange. He had heard no rumors about her arrival. So why was there such heavy patrol activity? His suspicion deepened when he noticed many townsfolk heading in the same direction. Quickly, Lin Tian followed the crowd. Before long, he found himself in front of the city's adventurer rankings board. There, etched at the top of the leaderboard, was a familiar name, Later. Lin Tian's brows furrowed. Had Later grown even stronger to claim the #1 ranking? This complicated things. If Later was truly that powerful, Lin Tian needed to act quickly or risk his revenge plan failing. As he passed by a local tavern, a loud voice caught his attention. "Drinks are on me tonight," the man boasted proudly, shouting that everyone should drink until they drop. Lin Tian stopped in his tracks. He recognized that voice. A sinister smile spread across his face. Finally, he had found his target. Stepping inside the tavern, Lin Tian's eyes immediately landed on Later, who was drinking without a care in the world. At that moment, one of Later's teammates spoke up, praising him for saving them from a four-armed monkey beast alongside of Freya. A woman beside them enthusiastically added that the captain was incredible. However, another adventurer, clearly annoyed, scoffed. "Boasting about something as insignificant as killing a weak goblin?" he muttered. Later's companion immediately snapped at him, furious at the insult. "Watch your mouth," he barked. "You don't know what you're talking about." The arguing escalated, the two nearly coming to blows. Just as things were about to turn violent, the tavern owner sighed, shaking his head. "Since you're all so strong," he interrupted, "why don't you deal with the dragons?" The room fell silent. The bartender continued, explaining that dragons had entered their mating season and were stealing livestock. "If you're so powerful," he smirked, "why not put that strength to good use?" Lin Tian, who had been silently drinking in disguise, perked up at the information. Something about this situation intrigued him. Dragons, huh? His plan of revenge may have just taken an unexpected turn. The man reiterated his warning. If the evil dragons attacked Bright Town and the capital failed to send reinforcements in time, the adventurers alone would not be able to hold them off. In that case, everyone would be facing the darkness. brimming with confidence, later stood up proudly, proclaiming that there was no need to worry. He had already summoned his master, the Sword Saint, and together they would join forces to slay the dragons. At that moment, the entire tavern fell silent. The warriors present stared at Later in shock. They couldn't believe it. He had that much influence. To personally summon someone as powerful as the Sword Saint was unheard of. Euphoria spread through the room as soldiers and adventurers alike began praising Later. If he succeeds, one of them declared, he will be hailed as the hero of Bright Town. Fueled by the growing excitement, Later raised his glass. Then let's drink to it, he announced. As a pre-celebration, in honor of my master's arrival and our inevitable victory over the dragons, I'll cover all the drinks tonight. The crowd erupted into cheers. Amidst the deafening excitement, Lin Tian silently analyzed the situation. This was his chance. He could use the dragon's arrival to his advantage and strike his enemies. Without hesitation, he slipped out of the tavern. Later, however, noticed Lin Tian leaving. Even after he had offered free drinks to everyone, this man had refused. "Hey," he called out, "are you really leaving? Why not stay for a drink?" Lin Tian glanced back, his expression unreadable. With icy detachment, he simply replied, "There will be more opportunities in the future." Later narrowed his eyes. Who turns down free alcohol? Something about that felt off. Bright Town was fully decorated, eagerly awaiting the arrival of the Sword Saint. At that moment, Later approached his master, who was meditating in a temple. With a respectful bow, he delivered his report. "The evil dragon lord is drawing closer, master. At this rate, they will attack the city soon." Hearing this, the Sword Saint calmly opened her eyes and reached for her weapon. She rose gracefully and turned to her disciple. "And the task I assigned you?" she inquired. Later nodded firmly. "The 10 dragon-hunting ballistae have been built exactly as you requested." Satisfied, the Sword Saint's gaze hardened. "If anything goes wrong, your reputation will be at stake," she warned. Leaving the temple together, the captain and his master were greeted by a massive crowd. As they passed, citizens stared in awe. Their jaws dropped at the sight of someone so majestic and powerful. Sensing their admiration, the Sword Saint saw an opportunity. "Use this moment well," she told Later. "Why is everyone just standing there? Tell them to prepare for battle." As expected, something stirred in the distance. A massive flying beast soared over the city. A panic scream pierced the air. A citizen dangled helplessly from its clawed grasp. Terror spread through the streets as people scrambled in all directions. From the temple steps, the Sword Saint watched calmly. "That is a scout dragon," she stated. "When it appears, it means the entire horde is following closely behind." She turned to Later. "Take your companions and follow me to the walls." Without hesitation, Later nodded and obeyed. Meanwhile, a goblin scout rushed to Lin Tian. "A dragon has entered the city," the goblin reported. The creature panted heavily, clearly having run all the way. "I went to verify it myself," he continued. "There are many soldiers on the walls. What should we do?" Lin Tian remained calm and calculating. "The time to attack our enemies is almost here," he stated. "But not yet. For now, we wait." Like a true strategist, he gathered his advanced-level goblin warriors and smirked. "This is the perfect moment," he said. "Let's enjoy the show." The dragon horde descended. Several massive winged beasts dove toward Bright Town. But then, something unexpected happened. A blinding light shot through the sky. A single, powerful blast of energy struck a dragon's wing, ripping through its flesh. Later, Anafria watched in shock. These weapons, their destructive power was unreal. The Sword Saint, standing atop the walls, observed the fallen beast. She then turned to the soldiers. "Do you understand how to use the ballistae now?" she asked. The soldiers nodded furiously. "Then fire," she commanded. The battle began. The sky darkened as hundreds of dragons swarmed toward the city. The soldiers unleashed a barrage of anti-dragon ballistae. One by one, the flying beasts fell from the sky. Cheers erupted from the defenders of Bright Town. The weapons worked, but then, something changed. A new presence emerged, something far more terrifying. Suddenly, the air grew heavy. An unseen force pressed against the minds of everyone in the city. People collapsed, clutching their heads. Pain overwhelmed them. Later, Anafria froze in terror. They knew what this meant. The true threat had arrived. The golden-purple dragon queen descended. The soldiers trembled, realizing the truth. Their weapons would not be enough. With her piercing gaze locked onto the city, the Dragon Queen let out an earth-shaking roar. She was furious. She would burn this city to the ground. Without hesitation, she opened her massive jaws. A blazing inferno erupted, surging toward the city walls. Flames rushed forward, ready to consume everything. The soldiers panicked. "The city is doomed," they screamed. But then, something unexpected happened. A massive magic circle materialized. A voice rang out, "Do not panic." The Sword Saint stepped forward. "I will face the Dragon Queen myself," she declared. "Continue defending the city." The flames struck the barrier. Yet, the city remained untouched. The Sword Saint's magic shield had completely absorbed the attack. Not only that, the barrier had also prevented the rest of the dragon horde from attacking the walls. Lin Tian watched from the shadows. His eyes gleamed. "So, this is the true power of the Sword Saint," he murmured. This war had only just begun. Cautious and waiting for the perfect moment to strike, Lin Tian observed the battle from atop a mountain. His expression remained calm, showing no surprise that the Sword Saint had managed to defend the city from the Dragon Queen's attack. Given her impressive stats, this outcome was expected. However, he couldn't help but admire the overwhelming power the massive beast had displayed upon its arrival. Activating his systems analysis, Lin Tian scanned the Sword Saint's statistics and immediately understood why she was able to neutralize the Dragon Queen's attack so effortlessly. Her strength was far beyond normal comprehension. Lin Tian acknowledged that Later's master was undeniably powerful, but that only meant one thing: he would avoid fighting her altogether. His focus was revenge, not pointless battles. As he continued to observe the fight, Lin Tian noticed something else. The Dragon Queen, though weaker in raw power than the Sword Saint, had superior endurance. Even if the Sword Saint could strike her with overwhelming force, she wouldn't be able to defeat the dragon so easily. Seeing that the Sword Saint was fully occupied with the Dragon Queen, Lin Tian grinned. This was the golden opportunity he had been waiting for. Determined, he declared, "The time for revenge against the human race has finally come." Turning to his goblin army, he gave the order, "Follow the plan. Infiltrate the city while the capital is under attack." The humans had no idea that another threat loomed in the shadows. Later, still engaged in battle with the flying beasts, shouted that these creatures would be difficult to handle. But then, with a smug grin, he boasted that he owed his dragon-slaying abilities to the teachings of his master. "Thanks to my mentor," he declared, "I am now a dragon hunter." However, before he could continue gloating, a panicked villager rushed toward him. Eyes wild with fear, the man screamed, "Goblins are invading the city." Later's smug expression vanished. His focus had been entirely on the dragons. He hadn't even considered the possibility of another attack. Just then, another terrified villager appeared, running for her life, and behind her, a swarm of goblins. Later gritted his teeth as he processed the situation. The goblins were no fools. They had waited for the perfect moment to strike, and now they had launched their invasion. Finally witnessing the goblin attack firsthand, Later's rage ignited. Like a true hero, he barked orders to his team. "Take care of the remaining dragons," he commanded. "I'll handle the goblins." By his side, Ifria prepared herself for battle. A few moments later, a goblin was spotted fleeing. Seeing the small creature retreat, Later yelled furiously, "Stop running and fight, you cowards!" But something felt off. The goblins weren't just running in fear, they were baiting him. Without warning, the trap sprang shut. Later and Ifria were suddenly surrounded. They had fallen into Lin Tian's plan. Seeing their captain captured, Later's comrades screamed in horror. "We have to save him!" But as they rushed to his aid, an overwhelming horde of goblins blocked their path. There were too many. It was impossible to break through. Then, without anyone noticing, a new threat emerged. A shadow moved silently through the chaos. Later, despite his desperate situation, suddenly felt a chill. He turned his gaze toward his allies, and his eyes widened in terror. "Behind you!" he tried to warn, but it was too late. A dagger flashed. Before they could even react, Lin Tian effortlessly cut down two of Later's companions. The speed of the attack was unreal. Later and Ifria stared in disbelief as their comrades collapsed, lifeless. And then Lin Tian stepped forward, smirking, mocking them. "I didn't expect you two to be captured so easily," he taunted. Furious, later roared in defiance. "You disgusting goblins," he spat. "I will slaughter every last one of you." But before he could make a move, Lin Tian kicked him down. "Take a look around," he sneered. "Stop talking nonsense." Later, struggling to get up, finally realized the truth. The city was falling apart. The humans were losing, and there was nothing he could do. Lin Tian turned to his goblins and issued his next command. "Take Later and Afria through the sewers. Get them out of the city." Then, with a sharp grin, he added, "The rest of you, head to the walls and take out the ballista crews." Meanwhile, the Sword Saint fought fiercely against the Dragon Queen. But then, in the distance, she heard screams. A terrible realization sank in. The goblins were attacking. The Dragon Queen laughed mockingly. "Looks like you're in trouble, human," she sneered. The two continued their relentless battle, clashing with unimaginable force. Smirking, the Sword Saint taunted the dragon. "Are you struggling?" she asked, landing a devastating strike. The Dragon Queen reeled, clearly injured. Seeing her opponent falter, the Sword Saint pressed forward. "This fight is almost over," she declared. "Your reign ends here." But then, a massive explosion rocked the city walls. The shockwave tore through the battlefield, drawing everyone's attention. The chaos had reached its peak. The Sword Saint's focus wavered, and the Dragon Queen seized the moment. With a mighty flap of her wings, she escaped. As she flew off, she called out tauntingly, "I'll be back, human. When I recover, I will not forgive you." The Sword Saint clenched her teeth in fury. She had let her target escape. With burning determination, she made a vow. "Sooner or later, I will go to the Dragon Isle and wipe out every last one of you." With the battle finally over, the Sword Saint descended back to the city. But what she saw infuriated her even more. The city was in ruins, and Later's squad had failed to stop the goblins. Seething, she turned to one of the remaining warriors. "Where is Later?" she demanded. The soldier, trembling, lowered his head. "He and Afria have been captured." The Sword Saint's eyes darkened. This war was far from over, and she would make the goblins pay dearly. The Sword Saint stood in disbelief after hearing the warrior's report. He explained that these goblins were unlike any others. Another member of Later's group added that the monstrous creatures were as strong as the great races, and not even Later himself could defeat them. Furious and determined to rescue her warriors, the savior of Bright Town declared that she would march to the enchanted forest and exterminate every last goblin. Before she could leave, a frightened villager grabbed her arm, begging her to stay in the city. If the dragons or the goblins returned, they would all be slaughtered without her protection. Soon, more citizens gathered around her, pleading for her to remain. They reminded her that they were devoted followers of the temple and the empire. It was her duty to protect them. Realizing that the people of Bright Town took priority over a captured warrior, the Sword Saint reluctantly agreed. She reasoned that, in comparison to rescuing a single hero's party, protecting the entire city was the greater responsibility. Meanwhile, at the Goblin village, celebrations erupted. The goblins cheered wildly as their chief, Lin Tian, returned victorious. Their admiration only grew when they saw him bringing back human prisoners. Without a shred of mercy, Ifria was thrown to the ground. A goblin warrior stepped forward, ordering the prisoners to behave. Later's expression darkened as he realized that the goblins had also captured several elves. Meanwhile, Ifria watched in silence, her mind processing the unbelievable reality before her. She muttered that there must be a hero among this goblin tribe. Hearing her words, Later turned toward his wounded ally. He asked if she had recovered, but Afria admitted that the poison in her body was strong. However, due to her sacred constitution, her body would soon fully regenerate. Before she could continue, Lin Tian approached them silently, his presence sending a chill through the air. Mocking her, he grinned darkly, remarking that he was impressed by how quickly she could recover. Ifria's eyes widened in shock. She desperately demanded to know how he knew her name and what his intentions were for capturing them. Lin Tian, his gaze cold and menacing, stepped closer to her. Without hesitation, he dug his claws into her thigh. A piercing scream filled the air as Ifria writhed in agony. Later, forced to watch helplessly, could only clench his fists. Furious, he shouted at Lin Tian, ordering him to stop the torture. However, the moment he raised his voice, a goblin struck him hard, silencing him immediately. Gasping in pain, later gritted his teeth and demanded to know if Lin Tian understood the consequences of his actions. Capturing them meant that the Sword Saint would come for them. If she found their village, she would annihilate them all. Lin Tian, completely unfazed, smirked. He declared that later's master would become his prey as well. However, there was no rush. Even if she searched for them, she would never find them. Proceeding with his next phase of plans, Lin Tian called over Kwang, a goblin warrior, and placed him in charge of training the second generation. He ordered them to head into the forest and hunt monsters to strengthen their forces. Understanding that he was bound to be hunted by the humans, Lin Tian accelerated his plans. He decided to interrogate later personally. Stepping forward, he pressed his foot against later's chest, pinning him to the ground. With a dark glint in his eyes, he asked if the humans enjoyed capturing goblins and torturing them in secret, just as they had done to him in another life. Later, confused, insisted he had no idea what Lin Tian was talking about. But Lin Tian's patience wore thin. His rage boiled over. Without hesitation, he grabbed a blade and sliced off later's ear. A pained scream tore through the air as later cursed him in agony. Gritting his teeth, later spat words of defiance. Everything they did was to protect humanity. Their duty was to exterminate goblins, who were nothing more than accursed creatures. Lin Tian, amused by his arrogance, laughed. He mocked later's righteous justification, pointing out that the real reason they hunted goblins was to increase their own stats. He further accused them. Eliminating prisoners alongside monsters was easier than saving them. He then demanded to know, how many humans have died because of your so-called justice? Later's expression shifted. For the first time, he looked uncertain. Ifria, her body still weak, stared at Lin Tian in disbelief. How did a mere goblin know so much about what they did? Consumed by pure hatred, Lin Tian declared that, unlike them, he had no need to pretend. Since he was already a so-called evil creature, he would teach his enemies a lesson. Barely able to move, Ifria turned to later, begging him to save her. Her voice trembled with desperation. Her eyes filled with terror. Later, watching her struggle helplessly, felt a wave of panic rise in his chest. Lin Tian, his smirk deepening, whispered the same words Ifria had once used on her victims. The lesson had just begun. He grabbed her by the throat, lifting her off the ground. Then he turned to later. He wanted him to watch everything. With a wave of his hand, Lin Tian handed Ifria over to the goblins. They eagerly closed in. Later, still pinned down, felt his heart sink. He was about to witness the worst. One by one, the goblins gathered around Ifria. Her horrified screams echoed through the village. And there was nothing later could do. A goblin approached another, informing him that it was now his turn to guard the prisoner. The goblin assigned to watch over her confirmed that Lin Tian had ordered that she be kept alive. At that moment, Ifria's severely weakened state became evident after all the torment she had endured. Despite this, the guard stated that she was still breathing, following orders precisely. Later, still restrained, called out to his companion, urging her to hold on. Weak and barely conscious, Ifria reassured him that he had nothing to worry about. She was not suffering. Her voice, however, was faint and drained of all strength. Before later could say anything else, the goblin guard silenced him, pressing his foot against the captain's head. The message was clear: prisoners had no right to speak. Meanwhile, in another part of the village, the elven queen cradled her newborn child. Looking toward Ifria's condition, she turned to Lua, asking if Lin Tian truly held a deep grudge against humans. Lua hesitated for a moment before confirming that they were in serious trouble. Hearing those words, the elven queen reflected. She recalled that Lin Tian had already mentioned his desire for revenge, and that he likely harbored great resentment toward humanity. Fascinated by Lin Tian's unwavering determination, she spoke with admiration. She remarked that he never left an offense unanswered, making him the most extraordinary goblin she had ever seen. And with that, this story comes to an end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring even more epic content. Turn on notifications so you never miss an update. See you in the next video.